let's get going. I thought one interesting way to kind of check in would be to ask this question, which is, when was the first time you ever earned money? Hey, welcome, CryptoZach.
Hey, thanks.
Hello, Gideon.
So I'm hey. Mert, do you want to go first?
So, sorry, for what?
The question that we're just doing a quick check in, which is, when was the first time, like probably when you were a kid or teenager, that you earned money? What was that?
So, when was first time? So, if it is an actual job, actually, 3 years ago, when I worked in a coffee shop, but like these little things when I was in maybe middle school, like work as day day job in friends, like my father's friend work or whatever. So that's it. So let me pass it to beer.
So, Annika, can you,
Hello.
yeah, go ahead.
So I'm a bit lost. I'm a bit lost because I just hop on a call from I just lo- joined this TEC just like 5 minutes ago, and then this is going on, so I just hop in to see what's going on, and I'm trying to figure it out in general, like how is this you know related to WG, but I see the title, so I think it's probably like a meeting related to like ethics stuff related
How
to
about
the
this?
token engineering.
Yeah. How about after this call, you and I can follow up and
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
can
So
answer
go ahead
questions
with
that
everyone
you
else.
have.
I'm trying to be observer.
But yeah, no problem. I mean, you're completely welcome to, we'd love to have you stay. So this is a focus group that is focused on kind of our economic model, our financial sustainability, and how we earn money. So,
Well, last
so
thing
the
is,
question, yeah,
where is the group chat for this? So I can see like if there is any
yeah,
chatting.
go up. You'll see under working group text, you'll see Sampo, and it's there. Okay.
Okay.
So, do you want to just share quickly, like how you made money the first time in your life, or you can also feel free to pass to somebody else. It's up to you.
Um, First time in my life, I'm doing like right now. I'm doing PhD. So the first time I make money is um, research assistant. So that's what's like the first time I make money. Um, and that's pretty much it. And, I just go with the education route. Just keep climbing the ladders. So I haven't like no little experience about the real world, quote unquote, of how people actually grow money. But right now, for example, I'm trying to approach it more systematically. So I'm reading through like portfolio investment type of management, like how do you do it systematically. So yeah, that's how I'll be. That's the way I will be approaching this in the future, which is through like data analytics point of view, and then
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah, because that's my background. So I mean, I'm trying to do something that's close to my
Okay.
expertise.
Cool. Thank you. So, do you want to pass it to somebody else? That's kind of our
Um,
tradition.
let's pass it to who's our name here? Crypto Zach.
Okay.
Okay, take it over.
Yeah, so hey everyone. I've actually got a pretty interesting one. So I was in first grade on the school bus trading Pokemon cards, and that's one of my friends in the school bus really liked this one common card, and it looked like a yak. And he said he loved it so much that he would pay me $1 for each card that he found. So I was trading with everybody else, getting all of this one common card, like trading them rare cards and like 5 cards for this one common card, and then I would get like 10 of them and bring it to my friend on the school bus and get a payday of like $10 because I found 10 of his favorite cards. So yeah, probably first grade.
Cool. Do you want to pass it on to the next person? Or
Yeah, I
can do it
passed
for
it
you.
to Bear 100.
Yeah, he already. You went already, right, Bear? 100.
Okay. Oh,
How about Livia?
yeah, sounds great. Olivia.
Thanks. First time I made money, I think it was like in theater, like selling tickets for my play or getting some type of acting gig when I was like from, I don't know, 11, 12, 13, something like that. And I'll pass to Tonga.
Thank you. Yeah, I was lucky also to make money. I don't know if lucky, but to make money from 12 to 15 playing chess. I had a few tournaments that I did really well, so I made some money. And then everyone from chess was turning to play poker. It was illegal for me, but I had a few fake accounts or friends that were older, and yeah, that was. I will pass it to Enti.
Thanks, Manga. I'm pretty sure the first time I earned money was at my father's restaurant when I was like 13 years old or something, and I sort of helped as a waitress there. Yeah, that's pretty much it. What about you, Jean?
Thank you, Mr. Andy. Yeah, so my dad was a computer engineer in the 80s, late 70s and 80s. So we had a bunch of computers around my house when I was a kid. So when I was like 5 or 6, maybe, I made a deal with my dad to format floppy disks, 5 1/4 inch and 3.5 inch floppy disks for a nickel a piece. And yeah, I would go around and start one and then go to the second, start the next one. We had about 10 or 15 machines. And so by the time I was like to machine 14 or 15, I could go back to number one and start it all over again. That was my hustle. And I'll pass it to Arini or Rex. Arini just came in.
I'm sure. I remember the first time I made money. I know some of you are in the Omega group, so you'll hate me for this. But when I was in...
He's very...
Oh, really? Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. But he was good.
It's super noisy. I can hear you, but it's like...
Alright, I'll switch mics.
We'll come back to you in a sec, okay, Rex? Irina, the prompt for the opening today is, when was the first time in your life when you made money?
Okay, thank you.
And do you want to go while Rex is fixing his mic?
Yes, I was kind of my brother-in-law had this factory of swimming suits, and my father wouldn't let me work. It was like it was really oppressive for women in my upbringing, so I wasn't allowed to work, and I did it in hiding. So I was like a kind of a secretary for this factory of him, but was weird. But then, yeah, that was. I don't remember if that was the first time or when in the 80s there was this stock market crash, big crash. I put my money on the stock market. I was like, I don't know, 17 or something. And my father used to give me allowance, a big allowance, so I don't complain about his rules. So I put that money, and for that time I had like 1,000,000 pesos in Mexican pesos, and it was huge. But I lost it all in the market when it crashed. But I don't remember. One of those was the first time I made money.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, Rex, do you want to just do it? Give yours real quick.
Sure. Yes. So I think I fixed my mic. So I was saying, some of the Omega people might hate me for this, but when I was 11, I did payday loans, kind of, for other students. So I would forgo having lunch myself and pay for other people's lunch in exchange that they paid me like double or something like that. So I ended up making quite a bit of money that way.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to have a special assignment for you in this working group, TBD. I'll come back to mine later if we have time in the end. But I promise you it's very entertaining. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go.
What? No, you have to say it.
Okay. All right, I'll say it. When I was a little kid, I was probably like 6 or something like that, and it was Mother's Day here in the U.S., and a friend and I were trying to figure out how we could make money to buy presents for our moms. And so I figured out that if we went and got rocks and we took some hammers and smashed it up into rock powder and put it into these little paper cups, then we could go door to door and sell that rock powder for a lot of money. And the sweet thing is that all our neighbors bought it because we told them the story. So that was the first time I made money. Not a lot, but we made some. Okay, so probably good that you didn't wait a long time to hear that story and have it build up as something really special. Okay, so let's dive into the agenda for today. What I wanted to do is just a quick check-in on Clarity. This is a new tool, and there's this group, and I think SoftGov maybe experimenting with it, and then the Writers Guild is using it too. So we're all still kind of trying to figure this out. There's a few rough edges. There's probably going to be a few rough edges. I already know one, which I wanted to mention right now, which is that it's not like Google Docs in the sense that when you edit a document, it doesn't track it, right? So what I'm going to ask you to do, so like if you go in and overwrite something, it just overwrites it. So, hey Manu. What I would ask you to do is when you're working on somebody else's document, just add comments on it, and then we'll come up with a process for then embedding. We'll work together to like take those comments and then actually embed them in the owner of the document, whoever that is, can then integrate it. Does that make sense? We'll work through this over time, but there are so many other benefits to this tool that I think it's worth kind of dealing with some of these issues. And Enti and I are doing some work with the folks at Clarity. We're getting trained starting in 2 weeks. So we're going to get a lot of like in-depth knowledge on how to use this tool. And Enti, I may ask your help in kind of like helping us with some best practices and just keeping things clean and stuff like that, if you're up for that, just as part of the making.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Okay. And then the other thing I just wanted to follow up on is if you go into, if you're in the Sampo, what's called a base, right? In Clarity, they call it a base, which is what we've set up for this working group. You'll see on the left-hand side here, there are some documents that I've already started up. And I just want to point to this first one here, which is, not the first in the list, but this is the first one I did, which is the results of last week's session. So what I'm hoping to do is get into a way of taking input from people as we're having these calls, but also other types of things, and then develop like a deliberate curation process. And what do I mean by deliberate? I mean that at any time, anybody can go back and look at the raw materials, like the stuff that you put into it. So like last week, we did that fig jam exercise. That's still there. I did my best to distill that down. And so then I broke that out in that fig jam document into like a separate section, kept the original results there. And so there's like an audit trail. And then I brought all of that into this document here. And so you can see at each step of the way whether or not your ideas were actually embedded in and how they were embedded in. Okay? The benefit of clarity is that when you bring things in, it's very easy to turn them into tasks. So I'm not going to turn this into a task right now, but well, actually we could. So the working group manifesto, you just go like this and turn it into a task. And now it's a task. And we could assign it, I can assign it to myself. We could put, to do, someday, whatever. You can do due dates. We'll get into this more later, but one of the nice things about that is you can assign tasks, you can manage tasks, you can even do rewards, bounties and things like that in Clarity that are token-based bounties. So we'll just leave that there for right now. And let me just ask if there are any questions or comments at this point about all that.
Yeah, how do I get to that same view? Because the only thing that I see is two groups, my notes and work, and then I see like a task board with to do, like invest in async work, Clarity
Okay.
demo.
Yeah, that's probably because you probably just accepted it. So let me just do a quick.
You can also try and check the wiki.
Oh yeah, we got a whole bunch. We got a whole bunch of folks.
If you go to the wiki section, all those pages that Gideon is showing are actually in the wiki.
Okay, so I'm the Satoshi's Arc name.
You are okay. Okay, so what I'll do is we're just going to go ahead. We'll talk about this next week. Rather than me spending a bunch of time right now doing this for everybody, we will. But this way, everybody should be able to see everything at this point. If you just refresh, you should be able to see everything. Did that work?
I can see the wiki now. That's it.
Okay. Well, I'll come back to you later. I don't want to get
Sure.
too stuck on this, but once you hit refresh or leave this base and come back, there will be stuff that will start to show up over in favorites. There is some little funky thing that's going on. I think some people are having some issues with that. Any other comments or issues that people are having with it at this point?
So is the use of Clarity is like finalized already? Like you're gonna use this as like the main tools for share knowledge?
Yeah, not for all of the TEC. There's just like a couple places where we're experimenting with it right now, and this just happens to be one of the working groups where we're experimenting. It's kind of like a Notion meets a wiki meets dwork, which is like a way of doing token-based bounties and things like that.
And regarding trying to curate ideas in there, are you familiar with like casting type of approach, where you try to capture per thought basis and then you curate it on the thoughts? So
I am not. So I'd be happy to, but what we can do is, how are you spelling that?
Sadocastin. Sorry. Give me a second.
How about this? Rather than take up a bunch of time, you just follow up with me after the call, and we'll look at that. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. So the first thing that I thought would be just good to look at is, can people see, if you're not in the document and you don't want to mess with that, just look at the stream that I'm sharing on Discord. You'll be able to see it, okay? So, and do you want me to, I can expand this. I can make this larger. That's helpful. Can everybody read this, okay?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is more just a placeholder, but Livia was helping me to set up, well, actually not helping me. She did set up the channels in Discord, and there's like a place where you describe what the working group's purpose is, what it is. And so this is like a placeholder for right now, but I just wanted to share it with you all, and maybe just look at it, and if you have thoughts, then in the channel after this call, in the text channel, maybe you can just put your thoughts in there. But I'll just read it out loud for now. Sampo is the Finnish mythic horn of plenty. It symbolizes this working group's purpose, community wealth. We focus on financial management, income generation, and the economic development that builds demand for the TEC token. So again, this is a placeholder for right now. It'd be great to get people's thoughts in the text channel afterwards. Because what I'd like to dive into is, we spent a lot of time last week kind of like in administrative mode, and there's some urgency to kind of getting us moving forward. So I wanted to jump into that, assuming everybody's okay with that. Okay. So this truly is a document that is in progress for sure. I wanted to kind of jump forward and get something down as more a stimulus for some conversation. That's what I'm hoping for most of today. So let me just give kind of a high level overview of some initial thoughts on this. The first is kind of a way of thinking about the overall problem that we are trying to tackle as a working group. It's a very complex problem, actually. There are so many moving parts that relate to fundraising, like financial management, accounting, all of those kinds of things. And it would be very easy, I think, for us as a group to get lost without some type of kind of like meta frame to help us organize our work. So one thing that I'm proposing is that we actually think of this like an economic development process. And I'm a big fan of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So in this case, if you think about it, like there's kind of a first phase of any economy is where it's like just getting up and running. And there's no guarantee that economy will actually survive, right? So that is really about like kind of the base level of Maslow's hierarchy, which is really about security and survival. And so there's this kind of base level here, which is economic security. How do we make sure that this organization, the TEC, continues to operate, in a healthy way, doesn't run out of money, and sets itself up for future success. The second tier here is in like Maslow's hierarchy, it would be like connections with others and then esteem. But here it's like, how do you start to build some momentum? How do you get this economy going so that it kind of like sustains itself, almost like a flywheel? Like if you're a potter on a potter's wheel, and there's like a flywheel, and you kind of like have to like keep pushing, but at a certain point it
You
starts to
got
spin out.
silent all of a sudden, but you're not mute.
I went silent, and other
Anybody else
people
hear
can't hear
him?
me.
I could hear you.
Oh, so that's me. Sorry.
Can you hear me now, everybody?
Yeah, just fine.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. So this next stage is really like, how do we get the economy spinning up so that it's like it's got its own momentum, right? You see that in companies, like once companies get going, they're like kind of hard to stop at a certain point. And then the last stage here is like where we're generating so much wealth that we can actually start spinning it out much more freely by investing in all kinds of mission related things. And this isn't to say that we don't focus this, we need to keep focused on the mission even in the beginning. But what this framework, what I'm trying to suggest in this framework is that an initial focus, we've got to make sure that we survive and that the economy is going to make it. And then it's about building, like, continue to grow on its own. And then from that point on, we're generating the kind of wealth that we can then start to spread out with like more of a orientation around abundance. So I'm going to stop there for a moment and just open it up for comments, thoughts, questions.
This is great. This is a great initiative. Yeah, I really like how you framed it piece by piece. It's important to be cognizant that it's a stepwise process. Yeah.
Thanks, Gene. Anybody else have thoughts or questions or?
I took a peek at the document that was listing kind of conceptual mechanisms for deriving some revenue streams, and it's giant. There are so many plausible methodologies here that we can explore, but I guess it would. An important first step is to prioritize which ones we think are going to be the most functional or the most mission aligned. I'm not sure, which is most important, whether it's directly based on the numbers and the revenue that they derive, or whether it's the culture that we're trying to kind of spread itself financially. So I'm not sure, but
That's actually a great point. Like figuring out how do we evaluate these things, and that's what I'm suggesting in this with this model is that actually we're that those criteria may shift over time. Initially, it may be about like how do we stabilize and make sure that our outflows aren't like greatly exceeding our inflows. But then then the next phase might be more about capacity, right? So like how do we make sure that we're building the systems and the services, things like that, that attract users that can then, like make sure that we get flow of income and like a demand for the. And then after that, then the criteria becomes the mission. I mean, it has to be mission all the way through, otherwise you'll never get that. Okay. Any other thoughts?
I have a question. I read that considering for the income mostly fundraising, but are other ideas about how to have a revenue other than fundraising?
Yeah, we'll get to that in 1 second, but yes, for sure. And this is something that I'll just answer it very briefly. What I would say is, well, actually, can I just come back to that in a little bit when we get to the next section? Because I think it will answer that. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving on to the next section. So this is just kind of like an explanation of what these different phases might be: economic security, economic momentum, economic mission. If somebody can come up with a better way of describing this, it would be great. It's kind of like, once you have abundance, you start to you share it very freely. So what this is talking about is kind of like breaking our work into different phases. And so I haven't even looked at like what phase 2 would be like, but I'm just trying to focus on phase 1. And I think that there are lots of different ways of looking at this. So this really is, this is a stake in the ground. This is just like a first cut at this to get all of your thoughts on this. But I'll explain just briefly what the frame is that I'm using here. So the first is that if you look at our spending right now as a commons, as an organization, it's it was going very quickly in the first few months. It's slowing down a little bit, but we're just not getting any income. And so in this period where we're not getting any income at all, really, how do we slow down the spending until we can start to spin up some income? And so that's the first question that's in this kind of purple bar here. The next is, how do we raise new funds? So to answer why this is the second step, and Irene, this kind of gets to your question. Why aren't we trying to develop revenues or income streams first? And my assumption, and this should be tested, is that it's going to take us a little while to actually build the services where we could actually generate some income that is large enough to be able to really help us, right? And so in the short term, we're probably better off going out and figuring out what the next round of fundraising would actually look like. Are we trying to go get grants? Are we trying to attract investors? What does that look like? This doesn't specify any of that right now. Like that's a question that's to be answered. But what it's saying is that's probably a faster path to making sure that we're stable than actually building the revenues, building services that then generate revenues. Even though we're close with some of those, but if you look at some of the working groups that are like furthest down the line, their potential to earn big money is still very unproven and probably a ways off. So I'll stop there for a moment and just get people's takes on this basic assumption before going into the question of how we would slow the spending.
Yeah, if we don't focus on slowing the spending initially, it's not really going to matter how much more revenue we can derive. It's going to be burned as fast as we can make it, likely. And it's probably being used for very necessary things at the moment, but just going through the painful process of identifying what might be duplicitous would probably be very worthwhile.
Go ahead, David.
Thanks. Yeah, I think just the differentiation between revenue streams as services and just things we could create for income is slightly different than TC utility token. And I feel like with the utility token, there could be initiatives that are more short-term impact. So maybe start looking at them could be a good direction.
I was trying to take notes. You're saying that the utility token could actually be a shorter term path to getting some income?
Perhaps it's very intuitively. I don't know. I think we should brainstorm on like what are some possible routes for TC utility, and then it feels easier to implement them rather than finding like revenue streams through services or things like that.
Yeah. I agree that the token can be used to incentivize behavior in the short or immediate term, and incentivize people to be productive and contribute to the commons or contribute to working groups. But people here also need to pay their bills, and the money needs to come from somewhere. And we can't just keep on withdrawing from the liquidity pool by selling to it. Like I think that probably one of the first steps that we should, or the first decisions that we should make is whether we're going to actually raise funding from some external party, which is not a bad thing. It's how the traditional world has done it, for so long. It is you get money from investors to build a product to eventually make revenue, and so there's many different parts of this. There's the revenue model that we can design and work towards achieving. Then there's the fundraise aspect to provide us with the funding to build that revenue model, and then we can use the tokenomics to incentivize productivity and participation from all the members of the commons.
Okay.
Yeah, NT, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think um, before saying that we are going to cut expenses or look for revenue streams, we should, in my opinion, the conversation should be about making two basic sessions of analysis, I guess. One for spendings and then for the proposals. And depending on the outcome, it may be worthwhile working first on the revenue streams or cutting expenses. Because I guess uh, I don't know. I'm thinking a lot of about other things. Because also, I don't think the cutting the expenses would be a lot of work because we can sort of delegate that to each working group after an initial analysis. But that's kind of also the same assumption with the revenue streams. We could definitely, after a first analysis, we could delegate some of um, the results of the analysis to each working group to sort of iterate over that. So I guess just that I would like to see the conversation going uh, on analyzing how can we cut expenses and then which is probably the best way to kickstart a revenue stream before getting to priorities.
I definitely agree
Yeah,
with that.
I agree. I think those sound like two completely separate categories too. Is the revenue stream or fundraising and the managing expenses. That might be worth considering separately.
I think that there needs to be some consideration as to like how desperate are we? Like I'm very new to this, so I don't know if it's like is our current inflow outflow gonna last for a year? Is it gonna last for 6 months? Or like what? It'd be good to get some numbers as to the extent to which like you'd either need to whether you need to reduce spending by like 10 or 15% or 50, I puts some more concrete, it gives you more concrete facts upon which you can like decide whether, right, do we need to raise funds straight away, or can we put it off and have a more kind of sustainable spending model before we do that.
I wanna say something actually. So I am about raising funding. I'm very my thoughts are very in line with Livia's thought that I think we should consider the token utility and this service providing hand in hand, because since this is a bonding curve economy and we will have pressure after the token freeze is open, I think creating intrinsic value through the services would be create an incentive to not sell the TC tokens and create a buying pressure. So I think while we are thinking about how those token engineering commons working groups providing services, we can think about what's the relationship with the token utility and how they can create intrinsic value for our tokens so that the selling pressure will not just be related to cultural build behind the token, but also intrinsic value of the, so that bonding curve will not become like a Ponzi-ish, So I think it's important to bring these into conversation. So, but other than that, I think this structure looks very like aligned to what I thought. Like let's let's like let's make some austerity within TC so that we can create a structure that will lift this austerity with more financial help. So I think that's very good. So that's my contribution, actually. My thoughts, sorry.
A quick note on what Rex said. I left a comment anyways, but so based on the audit, we spent about 200 to 284K this trimester, and we have about 734K on the common pool. And I guess based on his question about how desperate we are, which I think it's a really valid and good question. I guess we could assume that we are quite desperate because that's if we continue to spend that amount, that's probably like 2 or 3 trimesters more. And given that a lot of those funds haven't left the multi-sigs of our working groups yet, we could we should, in my opinion, start cutting expenses as soon as possible to avoid burning more cash. Because actually, like the analysis shows 284 spent from the common pool, but there's probably quite a lot left on each working group's multisig. And so yeah.
And also, maybe this is a clarifying point for everyone, but with conviction voting, we can't go to zero. So what happens is that it's just going to get harder and harder to pass proposals. And we also have an abstain feature that you can vote. You can put your conviction on abstain, which creates a higher conviction needed for other proposals to pass and slows everything down. So right now we have 3 proposals on gardens, and they're all kind of they've been there for a while. So it's taking a lot of conviction to pass proposals now because there is quite a lot on abstain. So it's not that we are like, I think the desperation narrative is a bit dangerous. Like we have almost 750 in the common pool. We're looking at all of these possibilities right now, and we have the ability to slow down the passing of proposals. So I think this is just timely, and we have the people and support and everything needed to make that happen right now without like feeling like we're desperate. with a sense of urgency, I would say, but that has been taken care of.
I didn't mean to like scaremonger anybody. It was just a matter of like seeing what it is. And yeah, with the kind of numbers you gave, it sounds like there's around a year, I want to say, in funds, and we haven't considered the effect that all of these working groups is going to have to that. So yeah, I think with this information, the proposal to kind of cut some funds and look at other revenue streams just make a lot of sense.
The transparency report they're about to release, right? And that's going to be a big, useful way to quantify the burn.
Yeah. So I think there's some consensus that's forming here. I would say, so let me just go back to that document. I think one of the wild cards in this is that starting in July, the TEC token is going to start to unfreeze, which means that starting in July of this year and then by the end of July of next year, all of the TEC token holders who bought at the hatch, which is like when we started, will be able to sell their tokens. And so that is kind of an unknown factor. We don't know what percentage of people are going to hold on to it and what percentage are going to sell. So there's some uncertainty in this too. But I think one of the things that's coming out of this is, hey, first, let's get a handle on exactly what the situation is, right? Like, how serious is this? And that's just going to take a little bit of analysis. What would be great is if any of you are particularly interested in doing that analysis, like looking at the numbers, if you can just volunteer in the text channel, just like put a little note that says like, hey, I'd be interested in trying to tackle this analysis problem. Then I think the other thing that I'm hearing is that, yeah, it may take a while to generate some revenues using like the working groups and things like that. But what I heard pretty clearly from Livia and from Mert, and I think I kind of heard this echoed in others, is that utility, like thinking of utility and like raising demand for the token may not take that long. Like there may be some options on that front. So that might be kind of like a good starting area on the revenue. And then the last is that, yes, there's an opportunity to raise funds, but, we haven't really talked that much about this. And I guess what I would hope is maybe next week turn to that question, which will be good because we'll have Griff here in the next call, and I think he's got some thoughts on that, on fundraising too. One thing I do want to focus on right now is our options with trying to slow down spending, and the kind of even just framing the way we analyze it. Our options are like right now we're not doing anything, and it is kind of naturally slowing down. Spending is naturally slowing down as so, and the uncertainty here is, like I said, we don't know about what happens when people start selling the TEC tokens, but that won't happen dramatically. That's not going to happen all of a sudden. We're going to have a little bit of time to adjust there. The other is this question of abstain. That is one option. People can put their voting tokens, their conviction voting tokens, into abstain, which essentially takes it away from the ability to actually fund proposals, and it just slows down the overall process by making it harder to get projects. Was somebody trying to talk? No. One thing that I guess I'm going to suggest here is that there's kind of like another path here, which is like a capacity building strategy, which as we're thinking about our expenses, maybe breaking them up into 3 buckets. The first is just like our operating expenses. What do we need to like keep these working groups going, and how might we trim some of those expenses? What would that look like? It's working with the working groups to actually help on that front. NT, that's kind of, I think that's part of what you were saying. And then 2 is what we might consider capacity building investment. So these are investments that we deliberately carve out that are going to help us to actually either do fundraising or to build utility for the utility token, or actually start generating revenue. So it's like we can proactively steer our spending a little bit better. And then 3 is how much do we reserve for external projects, that don't necessarily build the TC's capacity, but they fulfill the mission that we have, which is funding token engineering, advancing the field of token. And I was talking to Olivia about this a little bit earlier today. It's like, if we were to just suddenly come down and say, we're not going to fund any of that anymore, that might send a negative, one, that impacts our mission, and 2, it might send kind of a negative message out into the world. It's like, what are those guys doing anyway? They're not seem to be funding anything other than themselves. So I'll just stop. We've got about 8 more minutes, so let me just stop right there and just throw that out, that this idea of like, as we analyze our spending and think about budgeting, does this kind of do these 3 buckets make sense to people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm hearing a couple of yeah. And again, some of this stuff, if you need time to absorb this, these documents are in the Clarity base. And so you can feel free to go in, make comments and things like that. This is still very much a work in progress. So feel free to make comments here on this, and we'll then incorporate them so that we can dive more deeply into this next week.
So that third bucket, the external projects, is that with an expectation of a return, or is that more of a friendly investments for mission aligned people?
That is a very big question. I seriously don't have an answer for that. Like, when we have invested in, say, the Token Engineering Academy, I think that the assumption is that that's a grant, and that there's not really strings attached to that. But I'm not sure that we have 100% clarity on that as a community. I don't know. Olivia, do you have perspective on that?
Sorry, what was your question, Gene?
I was just wondering if in that third bucket, whether that the investments in external projects were being framed as something that we would expect a return on, or whether that's, like Gideon says, more of a potential grant where we would be, kind of like a micro commons almost, or we're funding another group. But I can see also in a way that it would be an indirect investment if, say, for example, the TE Academy is growing token engineers who want to then build token projects that will benefit or utilize the TEC's other revenue bearing services. So you can kind of generate people who generate efforts who then utilize our services for those efforts. I can see where there's an indirect route to a return, even if it's not explicit.
Yeah, one of the points of for submitting a proposal is how will this benefit the token engineering commons or the T field. So I think it's more on the side of a grant that has an implicit impact that is a token engineering public good, And then if people are voting for it and they are aligned, the voters are aligned with the mission of the TEC, that we know that that is creating some type of positive impact. But there was actually a case with the non-focus proposal that there was this request if they wanted to mint TEC tokens, and they didn't want to. So that was kind of controversial inside, but like for everyone, of like, that is not what we would like to have happened, but it's not like a deal breaker. You know, the grant was giving and the project is important. So maybe there is a way that we could express a little bit better expectations, like create better expectations as TEC for the projects we're funding and communicate that better in the proposal phase.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so it sounds like it is a little bit fuzzy there, and I think that would be something we should come back and try to clarify. Like, what does that mean when the TEC funds a project that is clearly outside of our operations and our capacity? Okay, I'm going to stop us here because we just have 2 minutes, and what I just want to touch on is what we're going to do next week. So if you can be thinking about this. One of the things I want to identify, we're already starting to get to this naturally. What does this working group need in terms of skills? Like, what are we missing right now? So clearly there's some need for analysis, financial analysis, and accounting analysis. And maybe we've got those skills in-house here, but if not, then maybe we need to go find them, right, within the community or maybe even outside the community. So that's one thing I'd like you all to be thinking about. And then the other is kind of to get to that point is mapping the skills and interests of people here right now who are already involved in the working group. Let's create a map of what you naturally are interested in diving into and what you have some experience on. So, Bear 100, I remember you talking about something kind of related to this, and let's not dive into it right now, but this is kind of like the people aspect of this working group. Like who's here, what skills do we have, and then what do we need to grow in order to be able to do our work. So with that, we have 1 minute, so let's just wrap this up gracefully. Just nice. Say goodbye, and thank you all for coming. We're just kind of getting this thing going, but it's great to have you all here and much appreciated and great feedback today. This is good insights. See you all later. See you all next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Gideon.
Bye.
Bye.